Welcome to another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com Deep Dive presented by EnTrust IT Solutions. Joining us on this week's show is former All-Star Circuit of Champions announcer and now Skagit Speedway promotional team member Blake Anderson. Before we get to Blake, don't forget to check out EnTrust IT Solutions. EnTrust is a full-service technology company serving small and mid-sized businesses in the York, Pennsylvania, and surrounding areas. The staff at EnTrust takes a personalized approach to technology. See why customers are choosing EnTrust IT Solutions as their technology partner by scheduling a free consultation at www.msp-entrust.com or by calling 717-292-8868. Now here's Blake. Blake, welcome to the Deep Dive. We appreciate you joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeremy.
When you first came on, you're very tan. You're in the Pacific Northwest. How did that happen?
I think it's because I spent the weekend in Kansas City with the Race Redeem Foundation at our foundation race at I-70 with High Limit. I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen the sun too much here in Washington yet. I think last week the weather finally started to turn, and then the next 4 or 5 days it's rained, but our weather looks beautiful next week, which is, knock on wood, what we're really hoping for.
Yeah, I do have a tan, but the lights are so bad in my apartment. I've changed them 3 times and I'm just going to look ghost white. So
that's all right.
How did it feel to be back on the mic last week in Kansas City? I'll start there.
It felt good. I mean, there are days I miss it. I really like what I'm doing now. And that's kind of what I always had wanted to do. I love announcing. And I think, there's maybe a chance I'll get back and do a little bit more this year. We'll see. And then if Caleb misses any nights, Caleb Hart, our announcer at Skagit, who's very, very talented, if he misses any nights, I might hop on there and maybe do some at Skagit. But it felt good. It was nice. And it was nice to know I can still do it. I hadn't done it in 6 months.
Did you prep for it?
No, I mean, a little. I really wasn't sure how much I was going to do because I had talked to Kendra Jacobs at High Limit about doing it, and Kevin had kind of mentioned it too, but it was like, I don't know how much time I'm going to have to do it, being there, that I was there for the foundation first and then anything else, secondary. So I really wasn't sure if I was going to get to do it too much. So I didn't do a ton of prep, as much as I'd like to, at least.
Well, we'll get to that stuff a little later. I want to kind of go way back. We know you're an Iowa Hawkeyes fan. We can't help that. And we'll get to that as well. But what was your first exposure to racing, whether it was asphalt, dirt, whatever it was? Was it something you grew up with?
Yeah, it was dirt at Boone Speedway in Boone, Iowa, the IMCA Super Nationals. My dad grew up in Boone. We had a Ford dealership in our family, and they had sponsored cars at Boone Speedway through the years. So Dad grew up going to Boone Speedway, and I think it was kind of natural just to take me to Boone Speedway, being that I grew up going to Boone all the time to see my grandma and spend time at the Ford dealership. It was about an hour from my hometown. So that was kind of the natural fit. And then Marshalltown Speedway, just about a half hour up the road from me. And then Knoxville Raceway was 25 minutes down the road. So, I mean, you could draw, I tell people out here in Washington, they're amazed that you could draw an hour circle around my hometown in Newton, Iowa, and there's 6 or 7 or 8 dirt tracks within that hour circle. So we never really needed to drive more than an hour. It's a lot like central Pennsylvania. We're out here, our closest dirt track is 3 hours away.
Oh, yeah. That's the home of Tyler Swank, Newton.
Yeah, yep. Swank grew up he's on the west side of town. I'm on the east side of town. So, but I mean, I've known Tyler a long time. I remember him playing high school football for Newton Cardinals.
Was he good?
He was a lineman. I mean, our line was always really, really good. We ran the ball. Newton was notorious for running the wing T up until from the 80s all the way to the late 2000s. So
wow,
we were going to run the ball, and the offensive line was a big part of that. And I think for a while, we made the state 16 out of the 48 teams make the state playoffs, and we made the state playoffs 20 years in a row.
That's good. Look at you. Well, now I know where the Iowa thing comes from,
yeah.
But announcing, which is what most people know you from, obviously with the All-Stars, but how did you get into announcing?
So it was at Boone Speedway. Toby Cruz, a promoter in Central Iowa, was a phenomenal announcer, announced at Boone Speedway. And he was working for IMCA at that time and traveling a lot. So Denny and Toby were incredible announcers. That's who taught me how to announce. And they had an opening at Boone, and my dad was like, "You need to do this." Kind of forced me into it. said, if we were going to keep coming, you're going to at least going to try this announcing stuff. So I did it, and I was announcing front wheel drives, which are, Hornets, the 4-cylinder cars, and dwarf cars. And I did that for a couple years, and then Toby ended up leaving. So then I moved up and got to do the IMCA modifieds and stock cars and all that. And for 1 year, and then Knoxville had an opening in 2009. And Tony Bachhoven pushed hard for me to get that because I'd announced what was the Harris Clash the year before at Knoxville Raceway, which was a big IMCA modified race in July. And I don't know, I must have impressed Tony, and he pushed hard for me to get that job. And I mean, that was kind of my big opening, and a lot of that credit goes to Tony Bachhoven.
I like Hornets. We don't have Hornets in central Pennsylvania. I wish we had a Hornet division. I might
fun.
HornetUnlimited.com on top of
There we go.
But did you go to school for it? Now, what was kind of your age here when you first started announcing at Boone? And did you end up in college? Did you do anything with it there?
So I was 15 when I started announcing at Boone Speedway. So I was a sophomore in high school. And I ended up going to school. I graduated from the University of Northern Iowa, which were the third biggest college in Iowa, MVC, Missouri Valley Conference. They beat Kansas to go to the Sweet 16 when I was in college. So that was fun. But that's where I ended up graduating from. And I majored in communications and electronic media, and I really thought that I wanted to work in the news. And when I was in college, I interned at WHO, which is the NBC affiliate in Des Moines, and one of the biggest affiliates in the state. I mean, that's where like Ronald Reagan worked at WHO radio back in the 30s and 40s. So there's a lot of history at WHO. And I worked with Keith Murphy there, a longtime broadcaster, and Chris Hassel, who's really got me in the door there for my internship. He's at CBS Sports now. And I kind of learned, I don't know, I maybe want to do this. So when I graduated college in 2013, I thought I was applying for some TV jobs all over the country. And then my mom and dad were like, you want to work in racing. You're not going to get a job in racing living in Des Moines, Iowa. We're moving you to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was frustrated because it was in the middle of the season at Knoxville. It was June of 2013. Like, you're moving. I was pushing really hard. Like, let me go through nationals, get me through August, and then I'll figure it out. And I said, no, we're going now. So they moved me down to Charlotte. We loaded up after an outlaw race at Knoxville and drove to Charlotte. And Brian Clausen had a house down there, and BC said, just move into my house that I had from my NASCAR days. You can live there. So I lived in BC's house, and after a while, I got a job with the Outlaws down there. And a year later, I got a job with the All-Stars, and the rest is history.
I knew you worked for the Outlaws, but I don't think a lot of people know that. What did you do with the World of Outlaws?
I was in the marketing department. I was in the office doing a lot of marketing work. I was creating the banner boxes and just kind of doing the grunt marketing work of getting your experience in there. Because when you move to Charlotte, everything's like, you need 2 years experience to get these jobs. And everyone's like, well, how do I get 2 years experience if the entry level jobs are 2 years? So I was kind of getting my feet wet. I wasn't really announcing. I did dirt car nationals and a few races in between and world finals. I pit reported world finals for 6 or 7 years. And I did a lot of work for the Cushion in there, flying some weekends out to like Arizona, doing some USAC stuff for the guys at the Cushion. They were very big for my career too. But yeah, it was basically getting my feet wet and learning the marketing.
You end up at USAC. How does that deal come about? And what's it like? I had Tony Laporter on a couple of weeks ago. His USAC experience did not go well. It's a different kind of crowd. How did you get the call to go for USAC? How did you end up there? And what was that experience like?
So when I was at USAC in 2011, in 2009, I met Brian Clausen and became really good friends with Brian. And through Brian, I met Kirk Spridgen and became good friends with Spridge. And they had an announcing opening in 2011. And I thought, well, this is just too good to turn down. And BC really pushed for it. He was on me, like, you got to come out here. You can move in with me. So I moved in with Brian and lived with Brian for a summer. And really, I mean, I was going to go back to USAC in 2012 until I needed an internship to graduate college. And they wouldn't take that as my internship. So that's why I took the internship at WHO in Des Moines the following year in 2012, working at the news station there. So, I mean, that's my experience at USAC was great. I loved it. I mean, I got to hang out with my good friend, Brian Clausen, all the time, and Kirk Spridgen became a good friend. And I ended up living with Kirk all 9 years. I worked for the All-Stars that we had a condo. But no, my experience at USAC was great, but it is a lot different crowd. And I was coming from the Knoxville crowd into the non-wing crowd. But they accepted me, which was great. I had a good time.
I got to ask you this. I know that's hard. I mean, Brian Clausen's such a big part of your life. And obviously, Everybody knows the accident, lost his life. That it hurt a lot of people, obviously, who knew him. I interviewed him a number of times. He was always a good guy, always good with fans. What was that like for somebody as close as you? And how much of a loss is that for the sport and what he could have done? Maybe similar to something Kyle Larson could have done.
I tell people that was probably one of the hardest days of my life. I mean, you lose a grandparent or someone older, and you kind of inevitably know that that's going to happen. At the end of the day, you realize it. But losing a close friend at 27 years old is, in the way that we lost him, is certainly not something that I expected. I was the best man in one of my high school buddies' wedding that night, and I was at the reception, walking out with my mom and dad. They were leaving, and I can tell you, I could probably get you within 10 feet of where I was standing in the parking lot with my mom and dad when Lauren called me that, hey, Brian had an accident. I was like, okay, but no, this is not a good accident. Like, we got to fight. We get, something ahead, and I can tell you exactly where I was.
Obviously, the loss for the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, Kyle Larson's doing a lot for a sprint car race, and I know people can debate that, whatever. I don't care about that. But Brian also could get that. I mean, he ran Indy. I was at the Indianapolis 500 that he ran, the 100th running, and then the drive for 200, all that stuff. And I thought he was the type of ambassador that could also promote dirt track racing, with asphalt and kind of meld it together.
100%. I mean, you look at the BC double, the Indiana double, doing the Indianapolis 500 and then running up to Kokomo and running and busing people up there. He was that connection, and I think a lot of that to Brian, but I think a little bit of the tip of the cap to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for really embracing that connection and pushing it on there and still pushing it. I mean, Doug Bowles and gang at IMS do a phenomenal job promoting short track racing in Indiana, and that is because of Brian Clausen. And I have to think Brian probably is smiling about that, knowing that he still has a lasting impression on the state of Indiana at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and driving that connection between, the greatest race sports in the world and short track racing. But I often wonder what Brian would be doing now. I think he'd really be racing his wing sprint car. I know that was kind of the plan. I have to think he'd probably be running with High Limit, with being close friends with Kyle Larson. But you never know. I mean, he would have been with the Outlaws there too. So I think he'd be a full-time wing racer now, but I think that connection would still be there. And Brian kind of brought that connection back, and then Kyle's taken the baton and continued to do that.
No, I agree with you. Obviously you were at USAC short time, then you went to WHO, shifting back to your career.
Yep.
How do you end up with the All-Stars?
So I was working at the Outlaws, and we had just lost the STP sponsorship, and I kind of knew, like, okay, that was before Dirt Vision exploded, so I knew, like, okay, the budget's going to tighten up here. And my mom and dad were living in Wisconsin at the time. Dad was working for SC Johnson. And I said, hey, I'm going to fly home. The Big Ten basketball tournament's in Chicago. I'll fly home. Let's go to Chicago. So we went to Chicago, and then after the basketball tournament, we drove up to Wisconsin. Racine, about an hour north of Chicago, really on the outskirts of Chicago, the way you look at it. And we were looking at houses, and I got a call from Roger Slack at Eldora. And it was one of those, like, okay, you had that gut feeling, okay, this is maybe something. And officially bought the All-Stars. We need an announcer. We need someone to do more than announcing, marketing, website stuff. And Roger had known that I wanted to do more than just announcing, because I didn't want to get done announcing and people try to go find a job and people like, what have you done the last 9 years? Well, I announced sprint cars. Well, what other skills did you gain? I announced sprint cars. So my parents ended up buying the house that we were at, ironically, but Roger said, you need to go interview with Jared Fruit at Stewart Haas Racing and try to get this deal. And 6 weeks later, I was announcing all-star races for 9 years. And I didn't intend on staying there all 9 years. Like when I took it, I said, I'll do this traveling deal a couple of years and, try to get back down to Charlotte. And 9 years later, here we are.
People think you were just an announcer, and you've mentioned you weren't. What else did you do with the All-Stars? I mean, I know you ran, scoring, my race pass and stuff while announcing, which I don't know how you did that. I watched it. So what were some of your duties? Because it was a skeleton crew. It wasn't like you guys had 10, 15 people on the road with you. You guys all had to pick up other duties.
We had a fun crew. I mean, I handle a lot of the website stuff on the back end, getting stuff, but the big job was working with all of our partners. Jared Frued would kind of bring the partners in, and I brought a handful in, and then working with them throughout the week on making sure that we stayed active with them in constant communication. That's one thing I learned from Jared is we need to have constant communication with our partners. So every week we need to be communicating to them, whether they communicate back or not. That's their choice, but communicating with. So I worked with a lot of our partners and doing a lot of stuff on the back end and some of the marketing, which I really enjoyed learning. And Jared was a phenomenal guy to work for. Tony obviously was incredible to work for, but he had a good crew in place. But you're right, we did do it on a pretty skeleton crew, and I was very proud. You look at like the first handful of years we were on the road, it was Don Gravy, Eric Walls, Ross Paulson, and myself. And then, if we'd come into a racetrack, maybe we'd find somebody to work for us for a couple of nights. But it was a pretty bare bones crew there for the first handful of years.
Announcing. I think it's an underrated gig. And if you could explain to people watching this, how difficult is it? I mean, people think you just get on the mic, talk about sprint car racing, that's it. It's easy. There's a lot of prep work that goes into that.
There is, and especially now because in years past, maybe 15 years ago, you could get away with not maybe doing as much prep work because once the cars were racing,
Nobody
no one
heard you.
could really hear you. No one was posting highlights. There was no live streams. Now in the era of live streams, people can hear you loud and clear, every single word. And trust me, if you make a mistake on a guy having 7 wins and they have 8 wins, your phone starts buzzing, Twitter starts going off and
Yep.
people just come at you with the pitchforks. And it's a lot of times it's an honest mistake. So, I mean, a lot of times it was 2 days as we got into the broadcast era. Jared Fruit let me kind of shift my job a little bit to spend 8 to 10 hours per race prepping and finding work. And it was a lot of work and doing my stats, but I enjoy that. I'm a numbers nerd. So I loved living on, your website with the track champions and series champions. I was on Sprint Car Unlimited a lot. I was on Sprint Car Ratings a lot, pretty much every day there, and my race pass. And you just lived in there and thumbing through results and making sure you have where they are in points and everything like that. But it's a lot of prep work. And then to be able to portray, filter that information and put it out to the public is where it comes in. I mean, I strongly feel there's a difference between a good announcer and a really good announcer, and that gap is pretty large. And we have a handful of really good announcers in this country, and then they shine. They really do. But a lot happens, and then you have the people complaining about, you're talking about this and the camera's there, and it's just there's a lot that goes into it. There really is. And announcer, I strongly feel, can make or break a show. A good announcer can make or break a show for you at a lot of places.
I've had Johnny Gibson on, and he actually said when we had him on a deep dive that he would rather have 2 men in the booth. He prefers
Yep.
that. Now you did that a lot. Was it hard adjusting to the personalities in the booth at each track? Everybody's different. Everybody has their style, and you kind of got to blend into that and work with it, but not big time it because you're the all-star, you're the main all-star guy. That's kind of a juggling act.
It is. It varied. I mean, I pretty much, you know me pretty well. I pretty much get
Yeah.
along with everybody. But there were announcers, certainly announcers that you went into and you really like, it clicked right away and you worked well together. And there are other announcers, it took a night or two to kind of get the rhythm of how they worked and how you worked and the rhythm of, some announcers were like, okay, you're the all-star announcer, you do it. And other announcers said, hey, can I work with you? And I really worked well with some announcers, and some announcers, it took a little bit of work to get there, but we got there. But I agree with Johnny, especially this day and age. I mean, working with Chase this weekend was great with High Limit. I feel like we could kind of bounce off each other, and that was a good 2-man booth. But no, you have to have two guys that work well together and don't just walk all over each other.
I had Tony on. Tony's had an interesting journey
Yeah.
to where he's at now. And Chase, you bring up Chase, he was a pit reporter first and then now up top. I find pit reporting and being in the infield more difficult because I watch Chase. There's no script. You don't know when they're going to send it to you. So you're on the fly all the time. And I find that to be difficult. You pulled off both, and it's very difficult to do that. Did you find that infield being in the infield harder than being up top?
It is, because as you said, you're not sitting at a desk. It's hard to have your papers right in front of you to go through, or anything, at your fingertips. You have to be ready to go at any time. And I strongly feel that pit reporting all those outlaw shows for those years with the Outlaws and Johnny. I mean, there were years I was doing 20, 25 outlaw shows on Dirt Vision pit reporting. I think that helped me in the booth because I had to be prepared to go on the fly with everything, and have information at my fingertips. And you kind of learn that. I think I took a lot of pride in my work, really, when I worked the late model stuff and the big block stuff, to show that I can know that stuff, because everyone kind of pigeonholes you as a sprint car guy because that's what I did. But I mean, I love late models, and I get to work late model races and some big block races, but I enjoyed working those because they challenged me. It was outside of my comfort zone to try to get to know and find facts on those guys. And some announcers you worked with, like a Shane Andrews, and Shane would be like, he'd be in the middle of his deal and he'd just throw it down to you conversationally, which was fun, but you really had to be on your toes and ready to go.
So year 9 with the All-Stars, not an easy one.
No.
You're hearing all the rumors, and I know I talked to you about this a while ago on the podcast, but how difficult was that? You're hearing, yes, you're sold. No, you're sold. Yeah. And then there's a long break. You don't hear anything. How difficult was it staying focused during that time?
Year 9 was tough, but I also say it was probably the most fun year I had on the All-Star Tour. We had a good group. We were close. We stayed in Airbnbs all the time. We did a ton together. So we had a blast together and a real family atmosphere within our group. But it was tough. You've got people texting you, the All-Star sold. Are they sold? I'm hearing they're sold. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying to plug along and do my job. And there were times where I had to pull myself back and just relax. Hey, the outside noise is getting very loud. I need to pull back and just focus on the task at hand. We had a good group, but there were days where it was stressful, and there were a couple days where Kevin Nelson and I had 3-hour phone calls. I'm like, what is going on? What are we going to do? What's our plan if we get sold tomorrow? But it all worked out. I ended up doing kind of what I want to do. I want to work on the promotional side of things, and on the number side of things, and maybe I can announce a little bit on the side. You never know. I may go back in 15 years. I don't know. You never know. I've never ruled that out, but I love what I'm doing now. And Kevin Rudine gave me a great opportunity. And that kind of came about later in the season, as I kind of got to the point where it's like, man, there is just way too much smoke right now for this to not be true.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew I had to start getting things in place. And then the high limit deal came about, and the opportunity there. And that was some sleepless nights on, okay, am I ready to hang the microphone up for now and do something different? Or what do I want to do here?
I'm sure you got offers from other people other than High Limit once everything came down. I mean, did you just put them all on a piece of paper and pros and cons, or how did you? And with that being said, how did the Rudine thing come about?
So the Rudine, I was at Dirt Cup, and I kind of had mentioned to Kevin, hey, I don't know what's happening. Would there be a possibility if things go the way that everyone's saying they're going at this point? This is June, so you're kind of blind to it. Post Speed Week, I just kind of want to let there's interest there if the All-Stars go away. Okay, and then he basically said, okay, let's touch back base at the end of the season. Let's get through the season. I'm not going to pull you out of this deal early. If we do, we're going to finish. Let's get touch base after 4 Crown. And we did, and then that kind of came together. But there were other offers, and I laid them out. I mean, I'm very close with my mom and dad, and I was back in Iowa for a weekend, and we basically sat down, and my dad said, we got to have a conversation. You need to figure this out. What you truly want to do, where you want to go, what route you want to take. We need to start laying some things out for you. And my dad I'm very close with both my parents. My dad, we just laid it out. What are the pros and cons, as you said, on long term? Where's their growth? If you go here, you're going to hit your head on a ceiling right here. But if you go here, the ceiling's up here. So that was a lot of it too, is where is there room for growth? And with Kevin, there is a lot of room for growth, and that was very appealing.
So you're at Skagit now, and with the Rudine, I don't know, whatever company.
All those companies.
Yeah. What the hell do you do? I mean, I don't think I don't think people really understand maybe what you do. What is your role and what is your job entail?
I mean, really, we kind of came in as like the first year, we're just going to carve this out. Kevin created this role for this wasn't and I'll always be appreciative of what he did for me. I mean, he literally just created a job for me and said, we're going to figure this out. We'll figure it out. You show up, and people ask all the time, what's your job title? And I don't really have one. I don't know. I joke that I love The Office. It's one of my favorite shows. And I joke that I'm the assistant to the general manager. But my daily, I mean, I've really kind of taken over working with, or not taken over. I work with Cheryl that does all of our sales, but the communication with a lot of our partners. So they hear every week from us. Working in the beer garden and help and kind of learning how the beer garden works is I've really enjoyed. I worked at a grocery store as my first job. So that's just satisfying to me, is moving things around and facing and doing some ordering. So I work with Steph that is our beer garden manager, and the ticketing. I've worked a lot in the ticket office, and I love that because I'm a numbers nerd. I grew up reading the back of baseball cards. I love the numbers and seeing, okay, how many tickets do we need to sell to get to this point? What percentages are we here towards where we were last year? So I've really taken on that and just kind of learning some other things. And I think as we get towards this off season, I'll start to work a little bit more with Kevin's other companies. But really carving out a path is kind of what we're trying to do here. And what I've enjoyed is really learning the operational side of a racetrack, going out and paint. I mean, shoot, last week I was painting letters on rows, repainting, and this next week we have reserve tags that for people that reserve their seats for Dirt Cup that buy the 3-day passes. So I'll go drill the reserve tags into the boards next week, and just little odd jobs that I'm learning around the racetrack that I really enjoy, and pop my earbuds in, listen to podcasts, and go.
What's it like working for Kevin? I hear he's insanely loyal. I've heard he's really easy to work with. It's a guy I want to get on the deep dive at some point. He almost comes off as almost like a hip kind of guy type.
Yep.
Give us a little look into Kevin Rudeen.
It's great working for Kevin. It reminds me a lot of Tony. He's fiercely loyal, and he just lets you do your job. He's not overbearing. He doesn't micromanage. He just lets you do your job, and you can go to him with ideas, much like I do with Tony. And Kevin is, shoot, some of our purses, he just gave me the freedom to go. Here's the amount of money you have to add to this purse, disperse it. And if Peter Murphy, our promoter, and John Hager, our GM, approve it, then we're good to go. So I got to kind of do some of that, which I had a lot of fun doing, and making sure we spread some money out. We'll get some more as we continue to grow. I mean, obviously, as we continue to grow, we'll add to our purses as Skagit continues to get bigger. But Kevin's great to work for. We've hit it off talking cars too. He's a car guy, and I'm a car guy. So that's been fun. He likes cars. I like cars. He's great to work for. And his business acumen is just what truly blows me away. I mean, he's created everything. Everything you see is created. I mean, his apartments, his other businesses he's acquired. I learn from him every time I spend an hour with him. I pick something up from him, which is, to me, is kind of what makes my wheels spin.
So Skagit Speedway, Joseph Terrell, who's a correspondent for SprintCarLimited.com. I was just on the phone with him last night. We were talking about his coverage. He's going to do 3 days of the fastest 5 days of motorsports, as well as Dirt Cup for me this year. Tells me there's a lot of good things going on in Skagit. The trajectory is up. What has helped Skagit kind of turn some things around in the last 6 months to a year? And are you guys pleased with the direction that you guys have going on out there?
Yeah, I've been here 6.5 months now. I'm pleased. I think we absolutely are going in a great direction. A big turn of it, I think, is the revival of the 410s. We notice a difference on our crowds when the 410s are running and the 410s are not running. It's noticeable. And we're trying to bring the 410s back. And that was one thing when Kevin Botts got it. He said, well, Dirt Cup's a 410 race right away. No questions asked. And we're bringing 410s back weekly. And everyone said, that's never going to happen. 410s are dead out here. They haven't ran here for 8 years. They're dead. There's no heartbeat. First year, 2023, they averaged 8.5 410s a night. Last year, they're 16. This year, our lowest, we've ran 5 410 races. Our lowest 410 counts 19. So we're trending in the right direction. Our opening night crowd was incredible. I couldn't believe it. They just kept, and it's sprinkling off and on, and the fans just kept coming. They just kept coming in. The line was huge. I mean, at one point, the line to get onto our property, you can see for maybe half mile before the tree line hits, you couldn't see the end of the line of the cars turning onto the property. We're running out of parking spots. We're trying to get fans to buy the tickets online instead of standing in line to buy the ticket. I was like, save time, just buy them online. Well, they have no cell reception. Well, hey, this year new, we have free Wi-Fi for all the fans. Connect to our free Wi-Fi and buy them there. So that's something we've added to the experience at Skagit this year. And concessions constantly changing. And we've got a lot of big plans at Skagit that we're waiting on permits to get approved for, to do some massive upgrades to the facility and really change the face of Skagit Speedway and how it looks. I mean, we've got a 7-figure press box that we're waiting to get approved. Right now, we're in 2 like temporary offices that you see at construction sites. You've got 2 of those temporary office buildings stacked on top of each other. The bottom one's our office, the top one's the press box. So we've got a lot of big plans at Skagit that we just need to get our permits for, that we're waiting on to get approved.
Little touchy, but I'm amazed at how inadequate dirt track facilities are as far as online sales, credit cards. That not many of them take credit cards. We're in central Pennsylvania. Look, all due respect to Knoxville, Pennsylvania is the wing sprint car capital of the world.
Yeah.
It's the most fans. It's the biggest area. When something happens here, it goes everywhere. It's amazing to me that I can only think of one track that takes credit cards at their concession stand, and that's Babs Motor Speedway. So knowing that, you've seen, is this what you're trying to do? Bring Skagit into just the 21st century?
So we have a huge push for online. Honestly, we have a fee if you want to print tickets at the racetrack. We'd rather you have them online and we don't deal with it. You send it to your email and you just walk right in. So we really are pushing hard on the online ticket sales. I mean, that's what you see on our social media, is online. And we get to the racetrack and people are standing in line. We have QR codes on sandwich frames that, like, here, scan here, buy your tickets now, skip the line, pop right in. And at the racetrack, we pulled all our ATMs out. We're like, no ATMs. We'd rather have you use a card. We went to cards. The first year we were more than half, well over half cash, I guess. Now we're 75% cards. I don't know, right in there. It varies. We'd rather have you use a card. A lot of trucks like, we want cash. Cash is king. And we're sitting here thinking, it's way easier with a card. You don't have to deal with theft. You don't have to worry about what you're going to do with all that cash before you get to the bank. Little things like that. You see a lot of these tracks, I wouldn't sleep knowing I had this much cash just sitting there waiting at the bank or driving that to the bank. No, I would be just sweating. And card, like, you know what, we'll pay the whatever fee and you don't have to worry about theft or anything like that. And the way we look at it, too, another thing is, you come to a racetrack, Jeremy, you have $100 in your pocket. That's all you can spend. You buy your tickets, or you say you have 50. All you can spend is right there. You have a card, your spending is unlimited. You're going to spend more. And a lot of people, they don't feel like they're spending because it's on a card that's not disappearing out of their pocket. So you can spend more at the racetrack.
Yeah.
And if you buy tickets online, the way I look at it is, if they buy tickets 3 weeks in advance, that was the last paycheck. They don't think of it as it's already spent. They're going to come, whether the weather looks like crap or not. They're going to come. They bought their tickets. So we push for that. And obviously, if it rains out, we do refunds and all that. You're not out of money, but we'd rather have you use a card. It's less headache for us.
Well, the one headache is you have some big shows. You have the Dirt Cup coming up, and then you got $100,000 on the line for the Skagit Nationals. So maybe the headache's coming, because that's a big nut. And obviously, high limit coming in. Do you look at it differently now? Because you're on the promotional end of it, do you kind of sweat it a little bit depending, what crowd's showing up? And also with having these big events coming up, weather, you got a lot on your mind.
Oh, it's definitely a different viewpoint, that's for sure. And I think I can kind of look at it from both angles. That is unique, that a lot of people can't at dirt tracks across the country because they never worked for a series. And I can come to our guys, our management group, and say, hey, just a heads up, this is how the series is looking at it right now, because I live that life. this is how we're looking at it. We need to give and take a little bit more, and maybe give a little bit more to them on some things. So, but yes, sweating is big events are around the corner, and making sure we get to the end of the year and Kevin says, hey, this is worth it. Let's keep doing this. But we have some
go ahead.
big race. We have some big money races coming up. That's for sure.
How did things look for the preliminary? You don't have to give me numbers, obviously.
Yeah.
Dirt Cup is looking pretty good, better than last year's sales.
Yeah, I was nervous 4 weeks ago, and I told you, oh boy, I'm a little bit nervous, but it's really picked up the last couple of weeks, and we're tracking to probably be ahead of last year. We're right there. I can tell you, I mean, a week out, we're pacing with last year right now.
Good.
And we have one good day in here in the next couple of days on online ticket sales, and we'll be ahead. So I think we're going to end up ahead of last year. Car count, I think, is going to be similar to last year. I mean, there's only so many 410s we can pull on the West Coast. Let's face it. We know it. And a lot of them are in California. So it's trying to pull them up here. And that's a big reason why we've increased the purse, is to make it worth them coming up. And NARC's done a phenomenal job, as you mentioned. Tonight starts the fastest 5 days. So NARC gives those guys a reason and some money coming up here, which is great. And, I'm interested to see what the $100,000 to win race looks like at the end of August, because we're bringing 15 high limit cars to the picture. I think we can be above 5410s at Skagit. We'll see. I mean, I think, we're low to mid 40s for Dirt Cup. I think we get a lot of those guys, and then you add in the 15 high limit cars, so which a couple of them are coming. So say 10 high limit cars.
Right. I might even come out to Skagit for that. It's beautiful out there. Look, I know. Look at me. But culture shock. You've lived in Iowa. You've lived in Charlotte. Been in Wisconsin. Now you're on the West Coast. I assume it's very laid back out there, except for Trey Starks. Gotta love Trey. But what's it like living on the West Coast? Do you have to get used to I don't know. It's got to be different out there. People have got to be different than they are over here. I know that.
Yep. It's a lot different. That's for sure. It's more different than anywhere I've ever lived. It has its pluses and negatives. I love it. I'm blown away by the beauty every day.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, on a clear, I tell my friends back home, on a clear Seattle day, I mean, kind of like today, a little bit cloudy, but on a clear Seattle day, and I'm driving down from the racetrack's I live on the north side of Seattle. The racetrack's about 50 minutes from me. So when I'm driving back home from the racetrack, if it's clear out, I can see Mount Rainier like it's in front of my windshield from 120 miles away. Look, reach out and grab it. It's clear Seattle days are undefeated. And the weather's not as bad as everyone cracks up to be. I'll be honest. It's not as bad because, the Midwest and Pennsylvania, there are days in the winter where we don't see the sun for a month.
Yeah.
That happens here. Everyone says, oh, it's so dark and gloomy. It's not really any worse than it is in the Midwest or in Pennsylvania. And we don't get the snow in Seattle. So, I mean, that's a trade-off. We really don't get too much snow. Maybe once a winter, they said. Up at the racetrack, we get snow, but down here, the line's kind of between here and the racetrack. It just rains, and I've told some friends, it doesn't really ever pour. It just rains, just sprinkles, and it doesn't rain hard that often. It just is annoying more than anything.
I would miss the snow.
Yeah, I like snow. So
I do too. People call me Ryan Hand says I'm nuts, but
I can tell you I like snow up until like mid-February. Once the sprint cars fire up, that's always when I started to get itching. Like, okay, I'm over the snow. Let's start sprint car racing. But yeah, I enjoy the snow. We get snow up at the racetrack, so I got a little bit of it up there. So it filled that need a little bit. And then we've got the mountains, the Cascades, an hour away with ski hills, and my buddy is on me to go out there and do some skiing next winter. I haven't skied for 20 years, and I told him I'd like to do some skiing. So it's like, we'll go out to the pass and go ski. I drove to Spokane for the NCAA tournament in March, the second week of March, and driving through Snoqualmie Pass, which is maybe not even an hour from Seattle, the snow was still above your car driving through the pass. It's like, okay, it's not far away. It's not like I have to drive far to get it.
So I'm going to throw something at you, and it's probably would rub some people the wrong way, but I think every situation has good and bad. Obviously, COVID. It was bad. It's terrible, but it forced businesses to be more efficient.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's a good side of it. All-Stars being sold. I understand what the All-Star history meant. You and I have talked about it many times.
Yep.
I like the All-Stars, always did. But I do not buy into that it was bad for Ohio, because I look at the races that they have now. They only have 2 less races. And I look at Ohio Speed Week. They're averaging, now last night was down at Hilltop, but 50 cars.
Yeah.
I think it forced promoters to promote more, circle the wagons, work on their product. And I think it helps the locals build their teams. Am I wrong on this?
I don't disagree. I can tell you 3 months ago, I was probably in the other boat. Like, boy, I just don't know I don't know what Ohio's going to do, how they're going to survive. But it did force promoters to promote. And that was something I've always mentioned. I said, there are promoters that open the gates, and then there are promoters that get out and promote. And as we've soldiered on through the years, it's visible. You can clearly see the promoters that just open the gates and say, hey, we're going to open the gates and fans are going to show up. It's XYZ Speedway. They know to show up. And the tracks that get out and promote. I mean, we've seen it at Skagit. We've really changed the way we promote and pushing hard in Seattle advertising. I mean, I'm an hour south in Seattle, one of the major markets on the entire West Coast. And I pull off my exit last night and I look up at the digital billboard that's off my exit, Skagit Speedway Dirt Cup, right on it. The blue just grabbed you. And we have Skagit Speedway digital billboards all over Seattle. We advertise on the TV stations in Seattle and up in Vancouver. Like, we've really changed how we promote here, and we've reaped those rewards. But back to Ohio, I mean, yeah, you 2 less 410 races. The money's being spread around to the teams. The local teams can compete a little bit more. And I think the Ohio Speed Week car counts show that Ohio's still pretty healthy.
Yeah. They'll beat us again in average car count for Central Pennsylvania Speedway compared to Ohio. Now, I do think we'll have more hitters, but
Yeah. Oh,
but
absolutely.
but that being said, as sheer numbers, Ohio is second to none. And Fast Series has done a great job. Yes, I know it's less money, but you got to build it. And I
Yeah,
think they're building something.
they had to take a step back with the All-Stars being
Yeah.
gone to take a step forward in a year or two, which I think they will. I mean, the car counts are speaking, and I obviously you look at like Fremont, we had our goes with Rich Farmer, but I think Rich has done a phenomenal job at Fremont, and he's trying. Obviously, that's the situation there Saturday night. I think there was a lot more that went into that. Listen, these people complaining about how Saturday night went. Rich owns a 410. Like, he wants to get that race in. There's just stuff happens. There's a rhyme and reason. I can tell these fans that think these series or racetracks are idiots. There's a rhyme and reason for everything we do, and we want to get races in. Sometimes it's just not possible. But
the only thing I'll push back on it, I don't like support divisions on big events like that. One, maybe two, too many.
yep.
But you live and learn, because when he schedules it, he doesn't know what the landscape's going to be. And that's what people forget.
That's what Rich had pointed out. He said, hey, when we put our 2 divisions on this was an opportunity for us to create our stars here, which I get.
Yep.
But he also said, we didn't expect 55 cars to show up either. And people are like, well, you saw 55 the night before.
You can't just
If
someone.
If you drop a division the night before, that's your bread and butter for the next 4 months of the season. You just killed your car count and you killed your racetrack. Like, it's not that simple. And Rich cares. At the end of the day, I can tell you, Rich Farmer cares. He cares as probably more than a lot of guys in Ohio. He wants to do big things in Ohio. And even when we were there in Ohio, like, Rich was the guy when the first year of the All-Stars with Tony, giving multiple $10,000 paydays to the All-Stars. And Rich will pay money at Fremont. He'll keep that racetrack going.
Promoting. You've been around the country. You've seen it everywhere. You guys have, I would say, changed some things at Skagit. Granted, you guys have a bigger budget, probably. Kevin's obviously done very well outside of racing. Still, do you look around and you mentioned take a step back, Ohio to take a step back. Does sprint car racing need to take a little bit of a reflection, look at themselves in the mirror of how they promote now to the younger generation, uh, to get more people in the stands? The old ways just don't work anymore.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one of the most encouraging things I have seen at Skagit this year is our ticket takers. I mean, one of the ladies in our ticket top office that I work with every day, Sandy, she's older. She's pointed out to me, she's worked at Skagit for over 40 years. She said this is the most amount of young kids she's seen come through our gates this year. And I don't really know what we changed in there to make that work. We're promoting a lot more on social media. We're spending a lot more on Facebook to promote our posts. I think that probably has a little bit to do with it because, that generation is on their phone a lot. I'm on my phone a lot. It's how it is.
Unfortunately, I'm on my phone a lot.
That's how it is now. My dad will get on me like, Dad, the times are different. It's not 1980 anymore. We got to evolve. But I think that's a little bit to do with this. Our budget on Facebook is large and we're seeing the returns. We've seen great social media growth. I mentioned at our advertisers banquet, we have an advertisers banquet for current and prospective advertisers where we bring them for a banquet. We feed them on a $60 a plate deal and do a really nice job to try to bring some new blood in and entertain our current partners. And I think I think every track should do that.
Absolutely.
But I said, our goal for this year is 10% social media growth across all of our 4 social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook. We crossed 10% a month ago. We're at 14% now, and everything except Twitter, X, is above 10% growth already, and some are above 20%. I told Kevin, I said, I think that I set our goal way too low. He said, I thought 10% was I thought that'd be great. And now it's like, can we get to 25% growth for the year? We crossed 14 yesterday. So I think that's been a big reason why we've seen younger kids is because our push has shifted a little bit to social media as well.
It's a slippery slope. I mean, social media, we all know the bad about it. It's easy to get on there and complain, but yet it's free to promote for the most part. I mean, obviously you can boost stuff on Facebook and whatnot, but it's definitely something tracks can use. I'm amazed that some tracks barely have Wi-Fi.
That always blew me away with the All-Stars is, we're going to so many different racetracks and we hit some racetracks that like, they don't even have a Twitter page. I'm like, this is free. It's 2023. This is a free app. Find some high school kid and give him $50 a night and a meal and tell him to go run Twitter for you. It's free. It just takes effort. And you want to go we had a track last year that didn't have social media. They had a terrible crowd at our All-Star race. And the guy said, well, I spent $8,000 at the radio station advertising. And I wanted to say, listen, it's not 1995 anymore. No one's listening to radio listenership is way down. Just like newspaper, it's down. Podcasts are taking off. You don't have a Twitter page or hardly have a Facebook page that gets used. That's free. If you'd have taken your $8,000 and spent $4,000 on Facebook, you probably had a pretty good crowd tonight and spent half of your budget. And you have $4,000 in your pocket.
Terrestrial radio is dead. I think
it's hard.
Everybody's on Sirius. It comes with every car now.
That's what I had when I was on the road. I mean, for 9 years, I had Sirius in my car because I'm like, I don't want to listen to ads and every hour be flipping radio stations to try to find a station that I don't know. I want to listen to this kind of music, but I'm in Columbus. I don't know what radio. So I got to flip. I said, screw it. I'm getting Sirius. And then I have podcasts. And I listen to podcasts from back home of radio shows back home that didn't have ads in them.
I got to ask you, how are you dealing not being near Iowa to where you can go to games and are you going through withdrawal?
I think I will this fall. So that was my big thing when I was coming up here. My mom looked at me and she said, how are you going to handle not being able to drive back for Iowa football and go to, the last 8 years, we grew up, we had season tickets to Iowa football. So I was always going to 7 games a year my entire life since the time I could walk to now. And she said, how are you going to handle not being able to just go to an Iowa football game at the drop of a bucket, which I did. Said, I don't know, I can fly home. And even when I applied, or not even applied, when Kevin and I were talking about a job out here, he said, hey, you'll be able to fly home for a couple Iowa football games. So even Kevin hit on it that, hey, we can get you to a couple Iowa football games. And I'm already planning which ones. And I'm in Big Ten country now, Jeremy. I'm 10 miles from it.
It's stupid. And I'm going to tell you this. Here's
I'm
something
10
to think
minutes
about.
from a Big Ten campus as of 2 weeks from now.
And they're going to be coming out there.
No, we come out, we mouse in my pocket, come out in 2026.
Yes.
But Washington goes to Iowa on October 12th, which I was going to go to, but now we're taking a family trip overseas, so I won't be able to go.
I got to tell you, think about it this though. The car ride distance in miles from Iowa to where you're at now is more than their offense will accumulate over 12 games this year.
We got this is a new
Stop.
Offensive coordinator, new
I don't
time.
want to hear it.
Top 100 offense. Calling my shot, Jeremy. Top 100.
Top 100.
Well, you put top 100 offense with that defense, and look out.
Okay. Well, you keep hanging on to that.
Offense.
Keep hanging on to that.
You can have me on in December. Top 100. Calling my shot. I'm shooting for the stars here. Mark it down.
You definitely didn't want to exceed expectations on top 100.
No. Well, top 100 for what we've had the last 3 years. That's a 25% increase.
Oh, you're funny. So, did you ever think when this all started, when you first announced at Boone, did you ever imagine you'd be in this position now where you can influence decision making at the promotional level at a major sprint car track in a region?
Not a chance. No. I can remember I talked in high school, Gary Dolphin, who's the voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes, long time radio voice of the Hawkeyes. I talked to him about where he went to school, and I can remember sitting in my basement on a call with a school up in Minneapolis that he graduated with. There was a radio broadcasting school for 2 years. It was like an 18-month program. I'm looking in to go there to go into radio broadcasting. And I remember getting off the call and my mom and dad saying, listen, you have to get a 4-year degree. You don't really have a choice. And I called my parents when I got to college and said, I'm done first week. Like, this isn't for me. My mom said, well, you better figure it out because you got 4 years ahead of you to get it done. Like, that's not an option. She lit a fire in my ass and said, basically, hey, you have to get a 4-year degree. But I know I really, even into college, I didn't think I would be doing this. And in reality, maybe 8-9 years ago, I didn't think I'd get to be doing this. And here I am. I'm very lucky. I've met some great people and put myself, I guess, in blindly kind of in good positions.
You said you didn't know what the future held. I mean, could you see yourself staying there until, retirement, whatever that is? I don't know. How old are you now?
34.
You're Jesus. 34.
Old.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not young anymore, though.
Okay. Little perspective here. So could you see yourself staying in this gig, being a West Coast guy long term, or do you hope to maybe sometime get back to the Midwest to live or whatever, or maybe take something back here?
I mean, I never want to close any doors, honestly. And that's one thing my dad had harped on me as he worked in the corporate world for 40 years. You never close a door, but I'm committed to being out here. I see myself staying long-term. When Kevin and I sat down, one of the big things for me that was like, okay, this is the right thing is when I sat down with Kevin, he laid things out, 1, 2, 5, 10 years on where we can go through the next, through a decade and beyond. So that was very appealing. That's like, man, Kevin's looking at me being here long term and not just like, okay, this is a hire, we're going to do it a year at a time. So he's committed to me and I'm committed to him. I mean, he's done a lot for me. And like I said, he rolled the dice on me and I will forever be grateful for that. Could I see myself retiring out here? Absolutely. Can I tell you right now, I'm going to retire out here? I don't know. You just never know what door is going to open 5 years from now. That's like, man, this is an opportunity to go here or go there. I don't know. But right now, I mean, the way our trajectory at Skagit Speedway, as you and Joseph had mentioned, is up. So it's hard to walk away from a ship that's on the rise.
Yeah. I mean, just like I said, West Coast, different. You didn't grow up there. But it seems like you're doing well. And I want to thank you very much for joining us on a deep dive. A lot of good stuff.
No, I always appreciate you having me on your shows, Jeremy. And I think I leap at every opportunity when you text me and say, will you hop on? Absolutely. I love chatting with you and about all things racing, wrestling, football, everything.
Spencer Lee, Olympic champion.
I hope so. He looked good at the Worlds.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I'd say that. Yeah, he looked pretty good.
Yeah, I had to text a couple wrestling buddies because you know me. I ask dumb wrestling questions. I have a vague understanding of it enough that I can go to Iowa's duels and know what's going on.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that stuff overseas and what's that style of wrestling called?
It's freestyle versus folk style.
Yeah, freestyle, like the rolling points and stuff like it's I have to sit back and like, what am I don't know what I'm watching. I remember one of the Iowa wrestlers had a big comeback last year in folk style, and it's because he rolled his guy over like 3 times, and that's what won. And they were going nuts. I'm like, I what am I watching? I have to ask Altmaier questions all the time.
Well, and freestyle for Spencer, he's so strong on top for the people who know wrestling, and he could just keep rolling you, and the points just keep. It's like a telethon tote board. And I'm not a freestyle guy. I'm like you. I like folk style. I think folk style is a little rougher.
Yep.
And you can brutalize a guy a little more. And when I've seen Spencer do that, but no, I think he's going to win gold as long as he doesn't get hurt.
One thing that's it. Yeah, that's unfortunately that's kind of maybe the outlier there is if as long as he can stay healthy. I mean, we obviously saw that affect him going for his 4th national championship a year ago. And one thing that blew me away, well, 3 years ago at Nationals, the Iowa wrestling team came to the Knoxville Nationals, brands over. And I talked, Brad Sweet's always kind of followed Iowa wrestling. So Brad will make a comment to me every once in a while about Iowa wrestling and how things are going, because obviously Brad knows that I live and breathe Iowa athletics. And Brad said, shaking Spencer Lee's hand, you saw why he is incredible. He's like, this kid's 125 pounds, and his handshake breaks your hand. Like his grip, I remember Brad telling me the grip in his handshake blew him away.
Spencer would, and you mentioned 125. I always tell people this when I first expose him. I said, I'm not going to say what I weigh, but I outweigh him by a lot, and there is no way I could even think about being on a mat with him.
Oh my God.
His grip, and it is his grip. People say his grip is so strong that when he gets on top, which it's hard to keep a guy down and ride him for points, that's his specialty. And if he tilts you, you're done. That's it.
It's a blast to watch. My mom and dad aren't big wrestling fans. And I always told Dad, I said, Dad, if Carver Hawkeye half as loud at a basketball game as it does when I remember being in college and they were wrestling number 1 Oklahoma State, we were number 2, and they had a pin in the last match to win the duel.
Yep.
I said, if Carver Hawkeye Arena could get half as loud as it got then, I mean, it was shaking. So we never lose at home. You wouldn't be able to operate in a basketball game to even think if it got half as loud as it did then. I mean, that place was absolutely rocking, and I hope Iowa wrestling is going to be back here. This new wrestling facility that we just opened not 2 weeks ago is a world-class facility. They said it's nicer than the USA wrestling facility out in Colorado Springs. That was the big commitment to kind of get Iowa wrestling back. And I think if you don't see brands get them back to where they need to be in the next year or two, I think our new athletic director is willing to make a move. There was rumblings, I can tell you, Jeremy, 2 or 3 months ago that our new athletic director, Beth Getz, was going to jump and make a move for David Taylor, who ended up going to Oklahoma State.
I'm not a brands guy, and I like Iowa wrestling. Right now, there's nobody on the planet as good as Cale Sanderson as a head coach. It's ridiculous, but I think David Taylor could get there. So I thought you guys
go get your feet wet at Oklahoma State. We'll ring the phone up when we need to, and you can come to Wrestletown, USA.
Okay. Well, I like what you're thinking there, but again, Blake, it's always a pleasure. I'm glad you took time out of your day. I know you're busy getting ready for everything next week, and we appreciate you being on the deep dive.
Thanks for all your coverage of Skagit Speedway. I saw you and Joseph's article a week ago. We appreciate it, and anytime you need anything, just holler.
Thank you very much. That's going to wrap up this edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com deep dive presented by EnTrust IT Solutions. Thank you to Blake Anderson for being on the show. We appreciate it. A lot of good stuff there. And also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and check out our daily exclusive content at www.sprintcarlimited.com. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Deep Dive.